We're changing gears a little bit today from all the metal work that we've been doing, sorry for the whip pan, to a little bit of upholstery work here. This is the bottom of one of the two seats in the 356. I have already stripped off the vinyl from the seat frame and padding, and you can see this has a little bit of an extra bolster here. So it's kind of unique how they put that together, but dissecting the actual cover here, we'll take a look at it before we get into the sewing part. But we've got a tuck and roll section here in the middle. We've got the bolsters on the outside of that, all connected with a piping, which is actually in really, really good shape. Surprising that the edge is probably in better shape than any of the rest of the vinyl. And then there's this kind of strangely shaped skirt that goes all the way around. And then on the back, kind of the fourth piece of vinyl here is this little tail that tucks into the seat frame. I've started taking dimensions off of this. We're gonna dismantle this to get the patterns for the side bolsters, the skirt, and the tail. I've already measured the tuck and roll section, so we're just gonna go ahead and make that panel up for both of our front seats. This is what the Sailrite Ultra Feed machines are based off of. There's a few other machines out there that are based off of the same castings. This is the original, the OG, if you will. It is a true walking foot machine. You'll see that as it operates. This is the seat back. I've already made those. We're not gonna have a video on that. That was me getting back into sewing after several years away. The first thing I did in this was to do a bunch of experimental panels for the tuck and roll. This one was the one that I liked. So it's 2 3/8 is the distance between the lines, both on the foam and on the fabric. So I've already got 2 pieces cut, one for the pilot seat and one for the navigator, if you will. I've already drawn lines on there. So we've got 5 tuck and roll, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tuck and roll sections. And then we have a 1/2 inch allotment for joining this panel to the next one. I'm just gonna come in here and fold this fabric on the line. I've got my fabric lined up with the outside of my inside walking foot, and we're gonna run this really, really slowly. Just wanting to make sure the first stitches are absolutely 100% spot on. I've been watching Mike effing Garage do a lot of upholstery work. He's been doing some awesome stuff, talking through his pattern making and some of that. It's been really a lot of fun to watch. I watch a lot of, I think you say it, Chechaflo Caesar's videos from Mexico. Maybe one more stitch right there. That's going to be it for this run. I always leave these really long because I like to tie them. So let's just take a look. That line looks pretty straight all the way across, and then on the back it looks pretty straight. Again, I'm going to come through and fold this line again. Plenty of string length, looks pretty good. So we'll just go ahead, continue to work along. So there we have it, the tuck and roll for our seat bottom. I have another one to do. I'll cut you back on when we move to the next piece. I did a little disassembly on this seat bottom. I took off the left panel. I was calling it a bolster. It might be a bolster. I don't know. If anybody out there knows their upholstery terms, you can correct me. But I always make notes on the bottom just to let me know where it came from, what it is, what, is there piping, here's the tuck and roll, here's the piping. This is the left piece, it's the front seat, and just all of those things that as you try and create a new one, you're going to want those notes. Then I took the skirt, I'm calling it the skirt, off, cut the piping off of that. This little back piece that's used to pull everything tight and wrap it around the seat frame. Again, just the notes of what's going on. There's actually some lacing that happens on here. You can see, I think, so yeah, some of these fat stitches that were done by hand. So just kind of noting where that lacing occurs. The hardboard there, the tuck and roll up there. So I'll use these pieces to make paper patterns. Here's these two pieces kind of roughed out as patterns. This one I'm confident in. It's just it's that tail panel. So we've got hardboard on there and then the lacing on both ends. So it's just a big rectangle, no biggie. Obviously, 50 years of being installed, it kind of has a little curve to it, but I think the original piece was square. Then our side panel there, I sketched it out as well as I could. Sometimes these things get kind of ripply and you hold them down as best you can. So I did that, and then I came in 1/2 inch. So we'll cut this on the inside line here, and we'll lay this pattern over the top of this and see if it's close. And if it is, then we'll make a new outside pattern over there on that edge of the paper. So here we go with the pattern sitting on top of the piece. And what I'm trying to do, this is the inside pattern. So I'm trying to line up the stitch marks there, because you can see on some of this, the width of the allowance there, the width of the allowance is inconsistent. And, like down on this end, it goes from almost nothing there. So really just trying to line this pattern up, and it looks pretty good with the inside of those stitching marks. And then making sure, you sort of flatten it out. It's like working with wrinkly metal. You flatten it out and you just see, is it close? And the good news is this stuff does stretch just a little bit. So close is good enough. It doesn't have to be perfect. I want it to be as close as it can be because I'm not super skilled. So the better my patterns are, the better I start out, the better off I am in the end. I'll throw this pattern over here, trace it, and then add 1/2 inch to the outside of this all the way around, so that now that's the size I cut. And then I'll use this pattern to mark the actual fabric on the inside, so I have a sewing line. It's like training wheels. I'm that skill level when it comes to sewing. I need the training wheels, so I go kind of over the top on some of the pattern stuff. Here are the patterns. The cut pattern and then the inside pattern. I'll call that my training wheels. I did the training wheels for 2 of the 3 patterns, and then this one doesn't really have a need for it because there's just one allowance on this edge. Everything else gets tucked away. All the patterns have been cut. I've got 2 of the big long skirts that wrap all the way around the bottom. 2 lefts, 2 rights, right, left, and then 2 tail panels that'll all go together. And then I've actually got the piping already made. I'll pull it out. But what I need to do before I do any connecting of these 4 panels all get foam, 1/4 inch foam. So I've got 1/4 inch here, I've got 1/2 inch there. So they'll all get 1/4 inch foam. This is sew foam. It has the fabric on the back there so you can sew through it without any issues. So I'll sew that to these panels here. So these pieces really, you want to have them laying nice and flat when you start, because they're real sticky to the foam. There we go. Hopefully you can see that. So it's just tacking it down to the foam. No biggie. There we go. All 4 of them. 1, 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. There we go. Now it's time to join them up with all the other stuff. I did the same stitch on the outside of the tuck and roll that I did on the outside of these side panels. And both of these have a 1/2 inch of, what do you call it, allowance on them. So I'm going to come in here with my ruler and draw that 1/2 inch line so I'll know where to put my stitch. And I'll do that on both sides. I went up and measured the side panels against the original. I intentionally cut this long just because I know as you're so into that thick of foam, sometimes things pull together and bunch up and all that kind of stuff. I'm fitting this tail piece. Staple this right in the corner before it turns, and then this turns up just a little bit here at the 2 ends. So I'll staple those, and then you can see we're getting closer to where that mark is now that everything's kind of stretched out there. I'll give it one more staple there. So there we go, number 1 and number 2, almost identical, not quite. One of the most stressful steps in upholstery for me is binding, and this machine actually has a binding foot on it. So it's got, this foot has a little concave doodad on it that holds binding. I guess I should start with, I made this binding. I just cut 1.5 inch strips, and then I use this trimmer string. I like the diameter of it, I guess. Some of the original piping is pretty fat, and a lot of the pre-made welting is fat, and I like the thinner stuff. I've seen it on a few seats, just looks better to me. So this trimmer string was the right diameter, and I just decided to go with it. And sometimes that's what you got to do. You just got to make those judgment calls and do what looks good to you. And you can see how that walking foot just allows you to follow right along that edge. And you can see I've got another 1/16 of an inch here probably to bury that stitch on the second round. So yeah, that's going to be pretty sweet. I've got the skirt with the welting or piping on it here. Good faces against one another. And I am not a pro, so I cheat in that I go through, and I think the old school way to do it is to use, I think they call them basting stitches, something like that, where you just stitch here. I use a stapler. I learned that from Flo, You need to check his YouTube channel out if you're doing any upholstery work at all. The guy is just amazingly good. But what I'm doing right now is just cutting some little relief cuts in here because I got to go around a corner. And I'm cutting just below the stitches that are there on the piping. But I'm not getting paid by the hour here, so we'll just staple it everywhere we think it needs one. So probably have to release a few stitches, and all this stuff gets hog ringed and bent and stapled and messed with. The other thing we did was come in here and trim where all this fabric comes together and all that foam comes together. I just trimmed it down. That one could use a little bit more trim to make it easier to go through the machine. And when I'm done with all of this, I'll go through and trim all these things down so that they sit nicely into the foam. There we go. You can see I stitched just barely inside the line and tried to do as good a job as I could to keep it straight. Let's flip her inside out and see what we got. So what I'm looking for here is whether or not there's any loose spots on the piping. And it doesn't look like there is. My goodness. It's almost like I know what I'm doing. And then you don't want any puckery spots either. If there is a loose spot, like, I don't know, you'll know what I'm talking about if you see them. But if there is a loose spot, you can go in and just stitch right over that spot and tighten it up. If there's a spot that's too tight, it's a little bit more difficult. So there's the two seat bottoms, and off camera I did the seat backs as well. Sorry I didn't film those, but it's the exact same thing with the difference of there's a back panel on the seat backs. So really same level of difficulty, same techniques, same piping around the edge, all of that kind of stuff. So we're going to cut it there for today. The next time we're doing upholstery, which might be a little bit, we're going to be refoaming the seats, and then we'll fit these seat covers to them. Take care, guys.